Okay, well,
Yes.
interview with Professor Karsten Fledelius, continuing part 3. Karsten, I know, although I'm very vague on the details, that round about the end of the 1980s, early 1990s, there was some controversy around the journal, and that Ken Short, the editor, was eased out of the editorship. Can you shed any light on that situation?
Well, it seemed like that IAMHIST was going to be an appendix to the journal, and that the journal should be taken over by a person in Carfax who in some way played a role within Carfax, which was perhaps contradictory to the interests of IAMHIST as a free, autonomous organization. And it was difficult then to know exactly what was actually happening, but there was some secret agreements which we in the council didn't know about. And when it became clear that there could be a danger of the independence of IAMHIST and its connection with the journal, we notified, but it was a longer process, but we notified Carfax. And it was, in my memory, it was connected with an internal problem in Carfax, in which way it should move and who should actually take the lead of it. But it looked like that Ken Short had made some sort of deal with a person within Carfax who actually perhaps wanted to use it as a tool to take the lead or the power within that organization, Carfax. I was not the one who was in the center of the investigation of it. One could say that the parliamentary leader of the investigation we made was Nicholas Crowley, and he was supported by, I think it was the warden of Oxford University. I don't remember his name. He was also
D.J. Wendon.
Wendon, yes. And Wendon was very well informed. And he had a network which actually outdid these manipulations which apparently were going on. They were heavily compromising for that person in Carfax, which was at the other end of Ken Short's negotiations or dealings. But it destroyed the confidence in Ken Short within the council. And therefore he had to step down from the editorship of the journal, and we made a new deal. We had this excellent agreement through many years with Taylor and Francis, which has actually taken it over. And also it has saved the sovereignty of IAMHIST, and we have a good partnership around the journal, in my view. But we were in a very dangerous way as we felt it, because something had been agreed upon, some contract understanding had been made, which we were not aware of. There had not been transparency in that process, and that gave us suspicion of misconduct on the part of our editor. So that is what I can say for sure what happened. It was very tense. Later I was in a similar situation, but I learned from this actually something. That was when I was in the board of a publishing firm which edits a journal which is called Sphinx on the culture and history of the Mediterranean countries. And the husband of the then dean of a certain university in Denmark wanted in some way to let this publishing firm, which was a part of an institute and a foundation, Orbis Terrarum, let that be affiliated to that particular university in a way that only those working at this university could be contributors to the journal. And the agreement was signed. It was so that this particular agreement with the publishing firm of the university should be signed by the members of the board. And at that time, the man who had the initiative, who was actually the husband of the dean of the Faculty of Humanities of that particular university, was dying. But he managed to get his signature on the agreement, just, I think, the day before he died or something like that. It was very dramatic. But there's one thing they had forgotten. There was one member of the board who was not present. And then we went to the foundation authority and said, this is not valid. And we managed to get the support of the authorities. The agreement was discarded. And then the editor, who was part of the deal, he resigned. And then I became the president of the foundation and reorganized it and saved the sovereignty of the periodical. Because that, what we feared was that those who supported it on the part of my university would break any connection with it. It would not be a periodical for scholars in all Denmark. It would be a periodical only affiliated to one university, and it would be a part of that university's publication program, and it could also be cancelled by that university if somebody should have another opinion. And we were an independent circle of researchers who had this journal as our main common project. Well, we managed to, we had declining membership of a number of subscribers. We were not in a financially very good situation, and it is possible that the deceased colleague, brilliant professor by the way, that he meant that the periodical was anyway, it would die if we were not affiliated to his university. But this crisis was in 2008, and the periodical is still there 10 years later. So, what the motives were, it is difficult to ascertain. But one thing is clear, and that is that sometimes you are in a situation where you should be very careful about smart deals, because they may have consequences you don't envisage. And there it is important to stick to the rules, and above all have transparency.
I'll bear that in mind in my dealings with Carfax. IAMHIST is now over 40 years old,
yes.
Karsten. You've been there from the start.
Yes.
How do you think the organisation has changed over the years?
Well, what I was very fond of was that we had the last conference in Paris, and that there was more non-English speaking or non-English originally speaking participants. I acknowledge that we had to go to the United States. The United States is important in this field. And by the way, Hollywood is placed in the United States. And I find that we have had very good conferences. I would like that we had one in Canada as well, because Canada is North America, or America is not only United States, but anyway. But it is important that we keep up our European background. And I would say also in a Brexit perspective, it's very important that this association doesn't develop in a solely English-speaking community where there is no space for research in European countries. So that's the thing I think is important. But I'm quite happy with how IAMHIST is now. I look back with satisfaction and joy that we are still there. We are still attracting new people, now many talented people. I was sorry I couldn't attend the master class. I think the master class is a marvelous thing. And what is so great is when participants on the master class later appear as colleagues in the council. I'm very happy still that as a past president to be a member without voting rights in the council, and I feel that we have preserved anyway the jamboree character and the family character. So therefore I'm also very happy to sit here and talk about all the memories, because I think the basic ideas came through. And I think that all of this Danish group who supported the project from the start feel the same way. That we have been true to our origins, and we have preserved the spirit of academic freedom from the 70s, which is so important.
I have one final question to ask.
Yes.
And this is as a particular tradition or innovation that you were responsible for in the IAMHIST conferences, and that's the IAMHIST song.
Oh yes.
Can you tell us about the IAMHIST song and where that idea came from?
Well, the idea comes originally from Russia. Actually, it goes back to Byzantium, and that is that you celebrate in important occasions. You celebrate and wish many more years, and normally persons are celebrating that way. But at the occasion of particularly this wonderful association of IAMHIST, this organization with its corporate and collective spirit deserves this celebration and good wishes. So we have 40 years of organized togetherness, and I hope for at least 40, and I hope also more than 40 years more for this organization. And therefore this wish, I think we should carry on. And well, of course it is a part of the Christian tradition. It is also brought in because we should not forget that Russia is also part of our community. and that we have had, from the start of the organization, Russian members. And one of the things I would like to support was more inclusion of Russian colleagues. Because Russia is one of the greatest film nations. We cannot deny it. And therefore, they belong to us. Like the United States belong to us, Russia belongs to us. But there's one thing I would comment on regarding this with the young people. And here I go to China. In the last years of my tenure, I was almost exclusively teaching in English. I had the foreign students courses, and they were formulated so that on the master class level, part of our teaching should be in English, both for the Danish speakers and the others. I would say that normally 50 to 60% were foreign speakers and 50 to 40% were Danes. But I was teaching in English, and I had often Chinese students. Normally female Chinese students, and rather young. And just in the course which was leading up to the IAMHIST conference in Copenhagen in 2011, I had a very brilliant younger student who wrote her bachelor thesis on the use of the Chinese Facebook for evaluating the reaction on a particular historical series in China on two groups of people, 20 years old and 70 plus. You could say the grandparents and the grandchildren. A series which covered both the Chinese Civil War and the Japanese occupation. All of this decisive period from, I would say, 1934 until 1949. And she made the inquiry that was, you could say, part of a media sociology oriented course. And she made the inquiry from Copenhagen, but via the internet. And she carried through these interviews, and she got very interesting results. The results she got was partly that this was a way in which generations could speak with each other. They could interchange experience. The 70 plus could tell not the former generation, but the former generation how they experienced what this series was about. But it also meant that there were put questions from one side to the other. And there were really differences, and thought-provoking differences, were in the question of the Civil War and its interplay with the occupation. And this means that this investigation had a high reflexive potential and told something about the problem of people of different generations, how they orient themselves in front of Chinese history and the official, you could say, textbook and mass media deliverance and depiction of it. And she made it very thoroughly, and the interesting thing was that actually she was on a level where she should not have been allowed to make a bachelor thesis, because she was in her second year of studies and not finished yet. But we looked through it and let her pass and gave her the note and so on. But it was so convincing and got the highest note. And then I asked her after the examination, will you bring this to the IAMHIST conference? Will you be one of those who give a contribution here? And she did it. She made it marvelous. And there you have somebody who is in her initial studies. She makes something really ingenious. And we had a very good session and discussion about it. The methodology was brilliant. And then I would say, why not? So some of the best students I had came from China, or I had a fantastic master thesis of a Brazilian student. She was working with these inquiries where you write to some magazine and ask about various themes. And her thesis was that the question of male orgasm was underestimated in the public space. And she compared how Elle and other female magazines were compared with Playground, and her investigation of how the answers were to those who made their inquiries, particularly men's inquiries, came out that actually Playboy was the most open, the most instrumental, the less prejudiced of these inquiry media. That was, the only problem I had with her, that was that she should finish at time and she should keep the size. It managed, it was a hard job, but I managed. But wow, what a theme. And well, she was very ambitious, and therefore she had, I think, first she had 4 magazines and 10 years of space, and then we reduced it until we had sufficient but exhaustible material. And then she made it. And again, there, one of those foreign students, and but I got, in my last years, I got all the difficult themes. All those who my colleagues were not very eager to take, I said, well, let me see. Let me take it. And I got such interesting topics. And again, you have this that if you see communication in a broader perspective, and the interaction between human beings and media, you should not disregard that there are also printed media, which you should take in. As film and media scholars, we should not disregard that the printed media and magazines and such things are also part of our world of communication. And as I'm the president of the Danish Helsinki Committee for Human Rights, and there I stick to that we edit a periodical 3 to 4 times a year, sometimes 5 times a year, which is called Human Rights and Wrong. And I insist on still, and I have the support of my board, hopefully, some critics say, why don't you make it all electronic? I say, no, we have to print it. Because it's the printed version which stays. The internet is floating all the time. And you are perhaps not printing it out, and suddenly it is away, or it's changed. But if you want to keep something, you shall have a periodical you can put on the table, and you can stable it if you want. You can put it in boxes if you want to have the whole series. This medium is not obsolete. And then comes when I got some sort of confirmation of it in a curious way. We are working together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, working with projects of developing civil society in Eastern Europe. Learning people to exploit the media and use the media for empowerment and promoting security of journalism and credibility of media. And there was a time when the Foreign Ministry was not so interested in what we were doing. And well, it was a bit disappointing. But then a new man came on the so-called neighborship, a neighborhood program, which is focused on Eastern Europe, the former Soviet and communist countries. And when he, just before New Year's Eve, when he came in his office, our little A4 periodical put out 24 pages was on his table. He read it, he phoned me and said, "When can I meet you?" And then he went, and then we have had a marvelous cooperation. Now, unfortunately, he has become the Danish ambassador in Ireland. But, you know, that is, therefore, the printed media, we should not disregard them, because they still have their function, together with all of them. And still, when I look at these here, as I told you before, one of the most publicized of my articles is from this IAMHIST publication from 1980.
I think that's one of the reasons why we, although now most of the readership for the journal is online, but the publisher is still keen to keep the print version.
It is so important. And it is also part of the IAMHIST continuity. And that's another thing. We have kept the continuity. We haven't yet had, we have kept to the biannual pattern. It hasn't fallen out until now. I think that's fantastic. We have a solidity of our organization, which is not a matter of course. There is, there is a feeling of obligation within our circle, which I'm so happy it's still there. And therefore I'm not, I think we shall sing for many years, but there are, in many respects, I feel the future more than in the connection with IAMHIST. I think IAMHIST has kept to its original ideas.
That seems a very appropriate and positive note on which to end. Karsten, thank you very much for your time and a fascinating discussion this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.